you could hear an orchestra. The Gene Cole Orchestra was playing. And there were two features. You could see Piccadilly Jim and a comedy feature called Knock Knock Who's There. The Piccadilly Jim starred Robert Montgomery, who is associated with one of the most famous witches of all time. Does anybody know who I'm talking about? He was the father of Samantha of Bewitched fame. So it's very appropriate we're talking about that the day before Halloween. This theater is made of 47 carloads of Newberry County granite, 2.5 miles of conduit, a whole lot of trusses, and that projection booth up there was made fireproof. There was a reason for that. In early 1900s, while this film was becoming popular, they realized that the nitrate film was very highly flammable. And there were several theater fires. One in England claimed the lives of 70 children. They were having a New Year's Eve show, and the film caught fire, and the children could not leave the theater, and 70 of them died. And so after that, theater owners who cared about the patrons in the theater, knowing how flammable the film was, they made their projection rooms very much fireproof. Thank you. That's metal up there is what I'm trying to get to. And the door is metal. And it's very, very heavy. And the projectionist's job, of course, was to show the movie. And that came in several reels. And his job was to make sure that happened seamlessly so that the patrons never knew that the different reels had changed. This theater, that first night we were talking about, you got several speeches too. You had the mayor talking to you, the president of Newberry College talking to you, and we had a glorious celebration about the opening of this theater. We had some things, we had air conditioning. Think about that, 1936. We had a sound system that was very modern, very up to date. And Ernie, do you want to tell them about the ghosts?
Well, if you keep up with Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures and all those other paranormal shows, they all talk about one of the things that holds ghostly memories is granite. And this is a granite building, and it's near a water source. We sometimes forget that there are a series of creeks running downtown other than just Scotts Creek, and one of them runs directly underneath this building. The creek on this end of town is completely enclosed and piping now, but it goes under this building to a cistern area, which was probably an open well at some point in earlier history. But the combination of water and stone tend to make this place spooky. And the combination of water and stone is known to hold memories. And a little bit of granite can hold a few memories, but 46 carloads of it can hold quite a lot of volume of memory.
And in the basement,
in the basement, we've got that cistern area. There's not a window in that sub-basement. It's pitch black there all the time, whether it's middle of the day or middle of the night. And yet somehow in that basement are two plants, two briars that are intertwined. It poses somewhat of a mystery, and from that mystery we find a legend emerging. And this legend takes us back to a time before there was a theater on this site. For that matter, it takes us to a time before Newberry was Newberry. This was simply a community in the upper part of South Carolina at the time of the American Revolution. Now, during the American Revolution in Newberry area was sort of split three ways. There were patriots in this area, there were Tories in this area. But there was a third section of the population that was trying to remain neutral. Didn't really care which way the war came out. And a large factor of that population were Quakers. The Quakers were opposed to the violence of war. And one of the easiest ways to get kicked out of the Quaker Church, or excommunicated as they called it, was to take sides in the war. So the story is set during a short period of time in 1780 when there is a British encampment near this site. There are several British encampments sites in Newberry County, and it involved the flooding of Bush River, and really until we had the 12 inches of rain earlier this month, I had never seen Bush River wide enough to really be considered a river at this point. But I've got a couple of pictures on my phone showing Bush River in flood stage, and it probably was more formidable then than it is now. But at any rate, the British Army got separated, and some were camped on this side of the river, and others were camped on the other side of the river. And as we all know from reading the history books of the day and also watching all those wonderful movies on the History Channel, British officers were well dressed, and wherever they went, they turned the heads of the ladies. And when the soldiers came through Newberry, they turned the heads of several ladies in the community. And one of them just happened to live in this area and was a Quaker. This young woman is having this dalliance with a British soldier here in what would become the center of the universe, downtown Newberry.
She was a beautiful lady. She was from Newberry.
Yes. Okay. We can vouch for that as solid fact. So, my train of thought has been derailed at the thought of the beautiful ladies of Newberry. It reminds me of another tale, the story of Tea Table Rock, that involved beautiful ladies and British soldiers. But this is not that tale. Families were a lot larger then. There was a brother involved in this love triangle who did not want his sister dallying with a British soldier and running the risk of their entire family being excommunicated from the Quaker church here. So he snuck out one night when he knew that his sister had snuck out earlier to meet her friend by the well. And they had one of those arguments that brothers and sisters have all the time. You're not going to do this. Oh, yes, I am. It goes from, oh, yes, I am, oh, no, you're not, to the pushing back and forth that we all end up doing. And apparently the brother got a little over-ambitious with his pushing and pushed her into the well. About the time that this argument is going on, her young soldier friend is coming around the corner, sees the brother killing his sister, and goes into a rage. Fists fly. Well, apparently this soldier wasn't too good in a fight, and this young Quaker, who's supposed to be neutral, is pretty good in a fight. Because whether he killed him or not, he ends up in the well too. And the young brother runs off before the rest of the British Army finds out that one of their soldiers is missing and has gone down a well with a young woman. The story goes that it's this defiant romance set at the time of the American Revolution that explains why there are two briars down in an unlit basement growing intertwined. It's the lovers in another form intertwining in a way that they couldn't in life. Believe it or not.
That's sad. Okay.
Well, have you ever heard a happy ghost story about requited love?
No.
Neither of them. They don't exist. It's always got to be unrequited love.
We are going to turn to a kindly ghost, though. Right up in the balcony, just beyond those two doors up there. That's where the costumes are kept for the Newberry Community Players. We have a wonderful collection of costumes. Most of them from the 40s on through the very early 70s and on beyond that. Many of those were donated by a very strong supporter of the Newberry Community Players by the name of Faye Murray Gray. Now, Mrs. Gray often participated in the play. She often was on this stage. Even when she was unwell, she never missed a performance. As a matter of fact, she never dropped a line. She was also somebody who had been voted best dressed in high school. And she would pick out the clothes that would work in her role, and she would bring in clothes for the other actors. She never failed to find exactly the right outfit to carry the role. She never failed to find exactly the right thing for the character to wear that would help with the storyline. And define that character just perfectly. Well, Ms. Ellen Hunt, current director for a lot of productions, would tell you that she does not have that gift. And often she struggles to find exactly the right costume for exactly the right character in the play. And she began to notice that when she would be up there trying to find what was going to work, she would come in the next afternoon, and whatever was the perfect outfit would be laid out exactly where she could find it. And sometimes when she was struggling, she would feel this presence near her, almost sometimes irritated, like, why can't you find this, you fool? Or, and sometimes sort of encouraging, why don't you look over here, look over there. And she was telling someone in the theater about this, about how this outfit just seemed to appear the next morning, or this outfit just appeared the next afternoon when she was handing it to one of the players, one of the actors. And some of the folks who had been involved in the players for a very long time began to tell Ellen, wait a minute, we know who's helping you. It has to be Miss Faye. And so now when anybody finds exactly the right thing, when something seems to be moved overnight, they always say, thank you, Miss Faye. We had a story earlier from Kira. Kira was looking last year for a pair of black gloves to go with the character she was portraying. She kept looking through the gloves and looking through the gloves and could not find them. Walks into the next room, comes back, and there on the top of the pile had appeared a pair of black gloves in exactly her size. Thank you.
Well, I also spent a lot of time upstairs in the balcony. Back when Community Choir did their productions here at Christmas and Easter, I was usually the one working the light board, or before that, the spotlights. But when I graduated to light board, as though that were a real graduation, it also fell under my jurisdiction to make certain that everything was turned off and turned on or at the right time. I think it's been cleared up a little bit these days, but back in those days, it was sort of a monster of electrical wires that ran from the light box up back through a series of conduit into the projection room, that fireproof room in the middle of the theater. Now, if something went wrong at the light board, you had to track it down to its source, and its source was usually the switch box. In order to get to the switch box, you had to trudge down the hallway across the front of the theater and feel your way through a door because there were no lights in that hallway. And when you got to that doorway, you took 2 steps up sort of sideways and then turned to face the metal door that goes into the projection room. And you're doing this by feel because you never remember to take a flashlight with you. And there is no light there. So, get the metal door open and you stumble into the middle of the room. Fortunately, there's nothing in there. But you're sort of going around like this, trying to find the cord to the one light that's in the room, and hope that you find the cord before you run into the concrete wall on the other side. Once you get the light lit, you can then open the switch box, make the corrections, turn out the light, turning out the light. You're in the middle of the room. You can't see a thing because when you're used to a dim bulb and turn it out, it's darker than dark in the room. You have to feel your way back to the door and work your way out. And more times than not, that door sort of failed to close on the way out. Part of it may have been all the cords that were running out the door, but part of it may also have simply been not being able to see where you were going at the time. And I always felt when I was sitting up there that there was somebody sitting behind me. Which I think it's cleaned up considerably now, but back then there used to be props stored on the back balcony seats, so there was no way that there was somebody sitting behind me. But one particular night, which I had to go back to the projection room earlier, I had that sensation all performance long that there was somebody right behind me. And when I got everything turned off and was heading down the stairs, I looked back and I found that there was indeed someone behind me. They were in the projection booth and were looking out the big rectangular window facing out in my direction. You know, there is really only one thing you can do when you realize that there's somebody who isn't there staring at you. And that one thing is wave and leave very quickly.
And again, we come back to the projectionist took very seriously the job of keeping the theater patrons safe. That fireproof door had to be closed. And Ernie, you didn't close it. So that old projectionist up there was trying to keep people here safe. So not every ghost is scary. Some of them are still trying to look out for the people that they try to help in life. So let's keep that in mind as we celebrate Halloween tomorrow. Not everybody who's left their body is trying to hurt you. Some of them are still trying to help. We are about to walk downtown, and we're going to talk about some of the ghosts that populate downtown Newberry as we go. And we're also going to tell you some of the stories that don't necessarily have ghosts associated with them.
But someday they might.
But they're creepy. All right, everybody got on something warm?
Not too long ago, the time the Ritz Theater was going to open, we had a disaster downtown. And that disaster was a dynamite explosion in a hardware store where Shells is now. Now, what were they doing with the dynamite explosion downtown? You go to a hardware store in that period, and they got everything. And it was not unusual to go into a hardware store and find a shooting range in the back so you could test out the shotguns. So you go into the hardware store, you're testing out shotguns, and suddenly realize that in the old inventory, there are actually sticks of dynamite stored in the building. And on this afternoon fall day in 1936, the shotgun shells met the dynamite, and the building exploded. As it turns out, there were very few casualties, and only one person actually died from their injuries. However, it could have been a lot worse. This was before the opening of the new Ritz. So the old Ritz was up about where Anderson Shoes was. Times are changing so fast I have to keep up with it. Via 1215 is now, was the site of the Ritz, the House of Comedy, before the new theater. And they had just let out an afternoon matinee performance. And there were a lot of children running around downtown Newberry that day. So having a dynamite explosion and a bunch of children downtown was a recipe for disaster that fortunately...
I'm so glad you took that home. Thank you. Yeah, we enjoyed that yesterday.
I love how she kicks her little legs when she's excited.
Or they've been here for a while.
I know some old, right?
They also on the drive. Are they on the drive? They on the drive-in too. Okay.
All right. Ernie and I are both hoping that eventually there will be a ghost of Johnny's Donuts. That will
And it may
appeal.
be me. I don't know of any ghosts associated with the little walk-through where the building isn't where it's supposed to be. But I've often fancied when I walk past it that I smell the ghost of Wimpy's hamburgers.
That's called grease.